Hello, I'm Amy from moonmindology.com, and today I want to look at the chart of Vladimir Putin. And I know that you have been waiting for this, that people have asked for it. Let's start with Venus in his first house. This is the planet that rules his chart. And being in the first house, he's very interested in his own ideas and believes in what he believes in truly and wholly. Venus is in a Malavaya yoga here. So he's very interested in art and he's very interested in beauty and things like that. It also makes somebody very, very charming. And he is popular and has been popular with the older generation, especially after the 90s. And Venus is what supports him in his political endeavor. Venus is also the planet of billionaires, and he is incredibly wealthy. Venus also rules the 8th house. So he could have psychic abilities, intuition, but it could also bring scandal to the first house. This is an Arista yoga because the 8th ruler is in the first. So it can give health problems. 8th ruler in the first, it can make life difficult at the beginning, but there can also be an interest in secrets and the occult. And who did he work for? He worked for a secret government operation, the KGB. That can be shown an interest in that kind of thing with the ruler of the 8th and the 1st. Mars is in the 3rd house in the fiery sign of Sagittarius, so it's quite happy in this sign. However, it's in the 3rd house. Now, the 3rd house is about siblings and competition. So he's very interested in competition and he will fight quite hard in order to win something. But I'm pretty sure he has been engaged in training for Sambo and Judo since he was a young teenager. So that can be seen in his hobbies, and he is very athletic. He's very renowned for being athletic and into that kind of thing. However, Mars is the karaka for siblings, as is the 3rd house. So that can cause a bit of a problem when you've got two of the same thing that's very strong in one place. It can create problems with that. So it can create issues with his, specifically the younger siblings. Mars also rules the 2nd house. So that's all about money. And going to the 3rd house, he can make money through competition and through athletic means. It also rules the 7th house, which means that there can be slight issues in the relationships. Because the 3rd house is a minor dastana, it does have a negative connotation, so it can create a few issues with the planets that go there. With the 7th and the 3rd is also education. So he could have met his wife in school or in early life. As Mars is aggression and anger, he could have had issues at school as well, and he could have had problems with frustration, but he could have been very, very good in athletic things. This is about the muscles, so this is where he's got a talent. There's an aspect from Jupiter to Mars. It's not very close, but it's going to have an impact. And this combination with Jupiter and Mars means that he will be energetic and lucky. So these are the kind of people who have a lot of luck and a lot of energy, and they can just get on and do things, and they are quite dazzling people. They're impressive people, and when you see them, you find them very, very charming and charismatic. Jupiter is about networking as well, so he will be very interested in networking. Rahu is in the 4th house. So the 4th house is happiness. And when you've got a malefic like Rahu there, especially with its obsessive qualities, it can mean that there's an obsessive drive to find that security and happiness. And sometimes people will go down the route of looking for material relief and also looking for power. So that could be where they're going to find a sense of security, because in youth there was a sense of things were out of control. And it can also mean that the mother can be obsessive and overbearing when they're growing up, which can cause problems. But it can also mean that the mother is very successful. But these people are always chasing some kind of material wealth or something like that in order to try and find the security. And it doesn't matter how much that they have, they will always look for it. It's something that they obsess over. That's where Rahu does create obsessions. Jupiter is in the 7th and it's in a fire sign, which is very positive. So Jupiter is retrograde in the 7th house, and it can create problems with teachers and children in order to strengthen their philosophical nature and their faith. And as Jupiter is retrograde in the 7th house, it can create problems in relationships. And it really does mean that he has to examine his interpersonal relationships in order to find meaning and find who he is. So there's that battle between, I think, wanting to have a family life, but also wanting to have power, because those two things don't particularly go together well, especially when you have that obsessive quality of trying to gain material things. So Jupiter is actually in a Parivartana yoga with Mars. So that deeply connects the 3rd and the 7th houses. So there could have been a meeting of his partner through travel or through siblings, or as I said, through early life, meeting them at school. It also makes those two planets very, very strong. His partner would have been very, very successful. I don't know a lot about her. If I remember rightly, I think she was an air hostess, which does link to 3rd house being travel. So that's an interesting thing that lines up. But with the 3rd and the 7th being linked, there can be problems in relationships, as I said. And in some cases, there can be a legal problem within the relationship, as it's got the 6th house linkage there. The moon is in the 8th house, and that would usually be that the mother has a really hard life due to the moon being the karaka for the mother and the 8th being a house of trauma and scandal. However, the moon is exalted in this position, and the 8th house is also longevity. So this is really good for his longevity and his health. But I will guarantee you, he feels things deeply. Whatever you think of this man, this is a deep feeler. He would be interested again in sciences and research of all kinds, but of course secrets. And then if you look, the moon rules the 10th house. Once again, he worked in the KGB. 8th house is secrets, 10th in the 8th, that is working in secret societies and things like that. So KGB, behind the scenes. Uranus is in the 9th house. So the interesting thing about this is it can create some unusual belief systems. So I wouldn't be surprised that through his life, because he is quite devoted to Christianity, I wouldn't be surprised if that is somewhat either a show or he's developed that through his life, but he does have some unusual beliefs underneath. It can also create some separation with the father, and once again, problems with teachers. So with that retrograde Jupiter, there can be problems with teachers that makes you grow into somebody who's more spiritual, but also that can also lead to higher education, as Jupiter is about higher education and law, which is what the 9th house is all about. There is that element of there's a problem with teachers. There was a problem in early school, there's a problem with teachers. Ketu in the 10th can create somebody who has a really unusual career. And what's more unusual than working in the KGB? It can also mean that there is a sense of loss. So where we're going is Rahu, where we've come from is Ketu, and there's always this feeling of there's something that's not quite right there. So this creates people who are constantly looking for meaning within their career, and they have to really love their career in order to stay in it and in order to feel secure there. But there's often a change. There's a lot of change. It's somebody who can't quite connect to their career at all times. 10th house also has qualities of the father again. So the 9th and the 10th house have father figure connotations, and it can really disturb the relationship with the father and create some separation there. So there's telltale signs of separation in some way, shape or form from both parents. He also has Pluto in the 10th. So Pluto is all about power, can be about corruption, but it's a place where we need to surrender to. So there is a lot going on in his career house. But the most interesting thing here is the fact that Pluto is Gandanta. It's at the last degrees of a water sign. So there is a karmic knot here. And that means his destiny is linked up to something. And there's somebody else who also has this, but we'll cover that next week. But Pluto in the 10th house, he was always karmically destined towards great power and great things. And we have to bear in mind that another thing that Pluto is a representation of is nuclear power. But you have to bear in mind, it's not just Vladimir Putin that has this. Anybody who was born within that time would have that degree. So this isn't an uncommon thing, but when you create a leader there, it becomes very, very interesting. Since Ketu and Pluto are sitting so close together, they will influence each other somewhat. So you may see elements of this start to really come out when he moves into Mercury Ketu Dasha, which starts April 2025. So we may see something around that time that does light up this 10th house and does start creating some kind of events surrounding Pluto. I just want to touch that his midheaven is also right next to Pluto. So he was always attracted to Plutonian type careers, which again is the KGB, it's the secret police, it's power, it's things that pertain to secrets and obsessions, as well as big government. And he is the most powerful man in Russia. He also has his sun in the 12th house, which is yet another sign that there's some separation from his father, and it sits very close to Saturn, which creates a sadness around the father as well. But with the sun in the 12th house, there can be some low self-esteem and connection to spirituality. I do think that there is a lot of spirituality and a lot of wisdom in this chart. But with the sun in the 12th, he is an introvert. He likes his own time, but there can also be very much an interest in history and things that are foreign. And of course, he's all wrapped up in foreign affairs. Saturn is the yoga karaka for his chart, which makes it very strong, and wherever it goes, it creates blessings and opportunities. So it goes to the 12th house, and the 12th house is all about enlightenment, salvation and spirituality. So it's that which is beyond the veil of this earth. It's far out, it's space, it's things that we don't quite understand, and it's mysterious. So these are things that he is interested in. He loves foreign affairs, and he would love history as well. And there's a talent with it. However, the 12th house does have links to debts and expenditure. So I would imagine that he is no stranger to these things. There will be some kind of, because there's link to the 4th and the 5th house, that he could feel some kind of debt to children, He may also find that his happiness, fourth house ruler, is always lost because he's got his head in the past, because he's not quite connected with the now, because he spends too much time on his own. So these can be problems that he runs into. And lastly, because it's the fourth house ruler, it can create problems with his mother. There was a clear separation and divide or difficulty with his parents. I don't know whether he lost them young or they just had really hard lives. I'm not too sure about that, but there is certainly a problem there. So the 12th house is about things that are behind the scenes, and Neptune is about things that are behind a veil, so things that are not quite as they seem. So I would say he is a very secretive man. He's very difficult to get to know. And what you see on the outside isn't necessarily what is on the inside. He likes to be alone and he is secretive. He likes to work behind the scenes, which is very, very interesting considering he has such a well-known job. But I would imagine that he's very interested, as I said, in history, but also in things that are not quite as they seem, especially with Ketu in his 10th house. So I wouldn't be surprised if he has some kind of link or interest in photography or even film or something that is quite somewhat glamorous. There is a glamour there. And because there is a stellium in this house, it puts a lot of emphasis on its meaning. It's important to him. The sun is here. That is his soul. That's where his soul is. It's introverted and spiritual, especially with Neptune here. He has Mercury in the 12th house exalted. He is going to be really good with money, great at finding a deal, and very, very interested in foreign culture and foreign affairs, which, as we know, he is. This could also be very, very good for spirituality. But Mercury is about communication. When it sits so close to Neptune, it creates a glamorous talking style that may be difficult to understand. And I know for a fact, after watching a few things with him, so often translators struggle to translate what he is saying because he speaks quite quickly, and I'm pretty sure he uses quite elaborate language, which is, I'm not surprised by that. I've even heard cases of him telling translators off and correcting them, which is quite amusing. But yes, that's an exalted Mercury sitting next to Neptune. What an interesting combination. People keep saying that Vladimir Putin is going to be taken down and it's the end of him. However, I just don't see that. I really don't. He has just gone into the Vimshottari Dasha of Mercury, and that's an exalted planet. Yeah, sure, it's in his 12th house, but it's good for 12th house matters like foreign affairs. It rules the 9th house. The 9th house is the house of luck and fortune. So I don't see that this is going to be a negative time for him. As it's 9th house ruler, it could be something to do with law as well. He is pretty obsessed with the West not adhering to the laws that were made in the previous agreements. And I think some of it is about that. And of course, the laws from before and foreign relations. As much as the Western governments are saying, you're wrong, you're this, blah, 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 they haven't actually been able to do anything to him. The 9th house also rules immigration, and he's had a lot of immigration into Russia from Ukraine, from the eastern side of Ukraine. There were lots of people coming over from the Donbass regions, and of course he's taken part of Ukraine, the Donbass region, so it's people coming in. 9th house, as I said. Then, as I mentioned before, he's going to be going into the Bhukti of Ketu in 2025. So that is going to be, that's going to have an effect on his career. And I think he will actually have more power during this time. And I think Russia in itself is going to be doing fine. Jupiter is currently aspecting his natal Mars at this moment in time. So this actually gives him a lot of power to compete, and it's bringing money in because Mars rules the second. And it's also pushing him towards business partners because of the 7th house. In June 2024, Jupiter will go over his exalted moon as well. And I don't see that being a negative thing. So I don't see him anytime soon losing his power or his call. The moon is also indicative of the public. So if Jupiter goes over it, that's favour from the public. That's exciting and expanding the public. So I would see that, especially with an exalted moon, as being a positive thing. This is why, even though there are demographics of Russians who do not like Vladimir Putin, overall, the general consensus is, from the older generation, things suddenly changed when Vladimir Putin got in. You don't remember how it was, which is why the youngsters come in and go, we need a change, and the old people are so frightened of change because of living through the 90s and before that being in the Soviet Union. So I think that's the political, from what I understand of what happens in Russia, that's the political kind of difference. That's the line down the middle. There's also an aspect to the sun in August 2024. Now, the sun rules in the 11th and is in the 8th. The 11th tends not to be the greatest of rulers, and it can create obstacles, especially when the ascendant is in a cardinal sign, which this is. So during that time, there could be some problems in August 2024 for Vladimir Putin. It may not be as good as it has been coming up to there. Then in September 2024, there will be an aspect to Saturn in the 12th house. Now, of course, Saturn rules the 4th and 5th. So this could be a period of time for the Russian people where the GDP per capita does increase, and there's also a increase in maybe land and happiness because of the aspect from Jupiter magnifying that. But there also could be a sense of loss as well, as there's 12 house placements involved. And not only that, Jupiter rules the 6th house. So that may not be as positive as I initially thought due to its ownership. But it does get an aspect from Venus, so I don't think it's necessarily that bad. I think it's more of a positive planet. Saturn is currently in Putin's 5th house, so this can slow things down with the economy and the GDP per capita. So we know that there is a lot of problems. As much as there's some boasting and saying, oh yeah, we're not doing as bad as you think we are with all the sanctions, there still is problems in Russia that is affecting the everyday average people. And I think that is going to be happening for the next 2 years. But it's a manageable place. So I don't think it's going to be as catastrophic. But yeah, I do think that the people are going to be affected in their daily lives and in their cost of living, and also the accessibility. That's probably going to go on for a little while. Uranus went over Putin's Jupiter in April, and it went quiet for a little while before there, and that's when there was a little bit of bickering that started happening. So this can create sudden changes. With that, I mean, especially with the 6th house, because that's underlings, employees and servants, it could be a sudden change in the way that his allies and the people he works with think about him, especially as the 7th house is about business partners as well. So this could be issues with the people that he thinks supports him. And also we've got Neptune, which is in his 6th house. It's not aspecting any planets as of yet, but being in the 6th house, there can be issues with health and misdiagnoses during this time. But as I said, The 6th house is about people who you employ, who work under you, who serve you. And Neptune can create scandals and things like that. So on that subject, there's been a assassination attempt on Vladimir Putin, something to do with a drone recently. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's from inside. I really wouldn't, because there can be betrayal from employees during this time, and all the way through to 2037, because that's how long Neptune is going to be in his 6th house for. So there is going to be some problems from the inside and from those who serve him. But thank you very much for watching. I hope you really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And don't forget, if you like my readings, subscribe, like the video, and if you want a reading for yourself, head over to moonmindology.com and you can book a reading with me. Thank you so much. Have a lovely week. Bye.